Welcome back to our journey through ancient lands, where every river holds a secret and every city whispers of ages long past. Today, we drift with the Akkadian Empire, dusty roads, grand ambitions, and the quiet hum of trade. Check out our past episodes if you've missed them, and sit back, let your mind wander and relax. Stay tuned at the end for 5 fascinating facts that few have ever heard. Let's begin. In the fertile lands of Mesopotamia, where rivers met and cultures intertwined, a new power emerged: the Akkadians. Under the leadership of Sargon of Akkad, they rose around 2334 BCE, forging one of the world's first empires. The Akkadians spoke a Semitic language, different from the Sumerian tongue that echoed in the south. Yet, they adopted many aspects of Sumerian culture, blending their own identity with that of those who came before. This new civilization was not merely a copy, it was an evolution. The Akkadians developed a centralized administration, shifting from city-states to an imperial structure. Their capital, Akkad, became a hub of trade and governance, though its exact location remains a mystery to modern scholars. This shift from fragmented city-states to empire laid the foundation for future political models across the ancient world. It was not just the ambition of Sargon that defined them, but the complex interplay of commerce, culture, and power. As they expanded, the Akkadians absorbed local customs, creating a mosaic of traditions that extended from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. Their story, though partly lost to time, reveals the first threads of empire in human history. At the heart of the Akkadian Empire stood Sargon, a figure both enigmatic and resolute. His name meant the true king, a title he claimed with both pride and cunning. Sargon's origins are wrapped in myth, tales of his humble birth, his rise from cup-bearer to conqueror. Historical records, however, speak of a leader who wielded both military might and diplomatic skill. Sargon established control through strategic alliances and campaigns, using a professional army loyal to him, not to city-states. His reign marked the first time an individual ruled over such a vast and diverse territory in Mesopotamia. He placed trusted officials, often his own family, in key positions, ensuring that loyalty to Akkad remained firm. His governance was not simply about conquest, but about integration. He standardized weights and measures, streamlined administration, and fostered trade. Yet, Sargon's empire was built on constant vigilance. Rebellions and rivalries tested his hold, but his ability to adapt kept the empire intact during his lifetime. Sargon's story is not one of divine right, but of human ambition and the early exercise of imperial power in the ancient world. Daily life in the Akkadian Empire was a blend of old traditions and new order. The Akkadians built upon the Sumerian foundation, continuing the use of cuneiform writing, adapting it to their own language. In the bustling markets of Akkad, merchants traded goods that arrived from distant lands: copper from Oman, timber from the Levant, and precious stones from as far as the Indus Valley. The city's layout mirrored the Sumerian style, with temples at the center and houses of clay brick clustered around them. Families were large, and kinship ties played a central role in social order. Women managed households, weaving textiles and grinding grain, while men farmed or worked in crafts. Religious practices intertwined with daily life. Temples remained important, though the Akkadian pantheon took on a slightly different form than that of Sumer. Still, Daily concerns were more about survival. The next harvest, the next trade caravan, the next flood of the Tigris or Euphrates. Amid these challenges, the Akkadian people adapted, finding resilience in the rhythms of the river valleys. Akkadian art and language reflected their dual identity, rooted in Sumerian heritage but evolving into something new. Their language, written in Cuneiform script, became the diplomatic and commercial language of Mesopotamia for centuries. Scribes carefully pressed reed styluses into clay tablets, recording trade deals, royal decrees, and poetry. Artisans crafted cylinder seals, small carved stones rolled onto wet clay, to mark ownership or witness agreements. These seals depicted scenes of daily life, myth and power, images of warriors, priests and kings. Akkadian statues often portrayed solemn faces with wide, unblinking eyes, a style carried forward from Sumerian traditions. In temples and palaces, reliefs showed the king leading his army, offering tribute to the gods they believed in, scenes of authority rather than the personal or spiritual. The Akkadians did not seek to reinvent art, but to use it as a tool of legitimacy and continuity. Their visual and written culture demonstrated how one civilization can shape and be shaped by the one it supplants, creating a new narrative of empire in clay and stone. The Akkadians inherited much of their religious framework from the Sumerians, but gave it their own distinct voice. They honored many of the same deities, yet their worship was adapted to their imperial ambitions. Shamash, the sun spirit they believed in, was often invoked for justice, while Ishtar, spirit of love and war, became an even more prominent figure in Akkadian prayers. Temples served as both spiritual and administrative centers, places where priests mediated between the earthly and the divine, where scribes kept the records of offerings and taxes. Daily offerings of grain, oil, and beer were made to these deities, thought to ensure prosperity and protection for the city and its people. The Akkadians believed that their gods favored order over chaos, a reflection of their desire to maintain control over their far-reaching empire. Yet this belief was practical rather than mystical. Religion, for the Akkadians, even though false, was woven into the very structure of their society, a constant presence in temples, palaces, and daily life. The Akkadian economy was as expansive as its empire. Agriculture remained the backbone, with barley, wheat, and dates grown along the fertile riverbanks. The surplus of these crops supported urban populations and sustained the army. Trade was equally vital. Akkadian merchants traded with distant lands, from Anatolia in the north to the Indus Valley in the east. They exported textiles, grain, and crafted goods, and in return received metals, timber, and luxury items. Control over trade routes strengthened the emir's wealth and stability. The state played an active role, organizing trade expeditions and standardizing weights and measures to facilitate commerce. Taxes were collected in goods and labor, filling the storerooms of the empire and funding its military campaigns. Craftsmanship also flourished. Metalworkers, weavers, and potters produced goods for both local use and export. Economic prosperity allowed the Akkadian elite to fund construction projects, communal centers, storage facilities, and city walls. Yet wealth also bred social tensions, as the burdens of labor and tribute fell most heavily on the common people. Still, the economy of the Akkadian Empire was a testament to its organization and the reach of its influence across ancient lands. Warfare was a constant thread in the Akkadian story, woven into the rise and fall of empires. Sargon's military campaigns were swift and calculated. His army was among the first professional forces, with soldiers loyal to the king rather than local city-states. Bronze weapons and chariots gave them an edge in battle, as did their tactics of siege and swift attack. Conquest brought new territories into the fold, lands rich in resources and strategically placed for trade. Yet every victory sowed seeds of future conflict. Local rulers often resisted Akkadian control, and rebellions erupted, forcing the empire to fight not just to conquer, but to maintain its hold. Sargon's successors, including his grandson Naram-Sin, continued this martial legacy. Naram-Sin, in particular, led campaigns against the Lulubi and other mountain peoples, securing the empire's borders through force. Yet warfare was not just about expansion, it was about survival. The Akkadian Empire was surrounded by rivals, eager to exploit any sign of weakness. Soldiers became both conquerors and guardians, holding the empire's boundaries against external threats and internal dissent. War defined the Akkadian age as much as trade and culture did. As the empire expanded, so too did the scale of conflict. The Akkadian military was a formidable force, but it was stretched thin across a vast and varied landscape. The rugged mountains to the east and the deserts to the west tested their supply lines and resolve. Local rebellions flared like brush fires, each demanding a swift and decisive response. Akkadian kings led from the front, donning the same armor as their soldiers, wielding the same bronze weapons. Battles were brutal and personal. War was not fought at a distance, but in the crush of shield and spear. Yet, the Akkadians adapted. They built fortified garrisons and supply depots, learning to hold territory as well as take it. Diplomacy was a weapon, too. Marriage alliances and tribute agreements bought temporary peace. But the empire's stability always rested on the sword's edge. Naram-Sin's campaigns reached new heights of ambition, yet even he could not silence every rival voice. Conflict was the empire's heartbeat, relentless, costly, and, in the end, unsustainable. The Akkadian Empire was forged in war, but it would be undone by it too, as enemies within and without found cracks in the imperial armor. Naram-Sin, the grandson of Sargon, is remembered as the king who took ambition to its greatest heights. He declared himself king of the four quarters, a ruler of all known lands. In some of the earliest examples of rulers portraying themselves with symbols of exceptional power, Naram-Sin wore a horned helmet, an image usually reserved for figures of greater significance. This act was not merely ceremonial. It was a declaration of absolute authority and prestige. It blurred the lines between human rule and legendary status, setting a precedent that would echo through later empires. Yet it also sparked debate within Akkadian society. Some questioned whether a human king could truly wield such ultimate power. Community elders and leaders who had once guided these matters found themselves overshadowed. Naram-Sin's reign was marked by both triumph and controversy, a high point of Akkadian ambition, but also a sign of growing tensions between ruler and community figures. His vision of kingship, at once human and exalted, would shape how later empires understood the nature of power, even as it sowed the seeds of future unrest. Temples in the Akkadian Empire were more than just buildings. They were the heart of the community. These structures were built from mud brick and towered above the city, places where important ceremonies took place and records were stored. Priests played a key role in managing these centers. They collected offerings, oversaw the flow of goods, and kept track of events that shaped daily life. Beyond rituals and gatherings, temples were also warehouses of grain and trade items, a sign of how closely tied economy and ceremony could be. The priests themselves were respected not for any divine power, but for their practical roles. They acted as scribes and record keepers, writing on clay tablets that told of harvests and trade agreements. While some believed these spaces held mystical importance, for most, they were part of a practical system that kept the empire running smoothly. These places reminded people of community and the need to work together in a world of shifting seasons and changing rivers. The Akkadian Empire was one of the first to create a truly centralized system of government. Sargon and his successors replaced local rulers with governors loyal to the empire, weaving together distant lands into a single structure. Officials traveled along dusty roads, carrying messages and trade goods between the capital and faraway towns. Standard weights and measures brought order to markets, so that copper weighed the same in the north as it did in the south. Clay tablets recorded each transaction, each shipment, each tax paid by farmers and merchants. This system allowed the empire to grow without losing control. It was not a perfect system. Rivalries and corruption still found their way in, but it offered a level of stability never seen before. The Akkadian approach to administration became a model for later empires, showing that clear rules and organized records could hold together even the most diverse of lands. For most Akkadians, daily life was shaped not by grand palaces or distant rulers, but by the simple routine of work and family. Farmers rose early to tend their fields, careful to plant barley and wheat before the rivers rose with the spring floods. In the cities, potters turned clay on slow wheels, and weavers worked at looms to make cloth for local markets. Families gathered at the end of each day to share meals and talk about the latest news from traders who passed through. Children played in narrow alleys, their laughter rising above the hum of the city. Though the empire's laws reached every corner, most people felt their weight only when taxes were due, or soldiers marched through on patrol. In between, life carried on as it always had, built on the quiet rhythm of planting, harvest, and the flow of the rivers. The Akkadian Empire was linked to the wider world through trade and careful diplomacy. Merchants followed dusty caravan trails, bringing goods from lands that stretched beyond the horizon. Copper from the mountains of Anatolia, cedar wood from faraway forests, and shimmering stones from distant valleys found their way to Akkadian cities. Traders used riverboats to carry goods downstream, while donkeys hauled loads across rocky passes. The empire used more than trade alone to reach its neighbors. Gifts were exchanged and alliances formed, not with grand gestures of peace, but with small acts of practical partnership. While local conflicts never vanished entirely, trade kept the rivers of connection flowing. This quiet diplomacy let the Akkadian Empire bring distant lands together without always drawing the sword. Trade routes, even as they shifted over the years, became the threads that wove a larger world together, one shipment of copper or one handshake at a time. For all its might, the Akkadian Empire was still at the mercy of nature. Records hint at years when the rivers ran low and the earth cracked under the sun's heat. Crops failed and stores of grain thinned, leaving families to wonder how they would feed their children. The empire's trade routes brought in goods, but could not bring rain. Local leaders found themselves powerless when the sky refused to give water. These years of hunger weakened the bonds that held the empire together. As villages emptied and families moved in search of better land, the empire's carefully laid plans began to crack. In these lean years, Akkadian power seemed smaller, no match for the whisper of wind across dry fields. The fall of Akkad was not a single battle or betrayal. It was the slow work of sun and soil, a lesson that even the greatest plans must bow to the earth's quiet voice. As the Akkadian Empire weakened, new groups moved in from the hills and plains beyond its borders. The Gutians, people from the Zagros Mountains, came in waves, not as traders or visitors, but as newcomers ready to claim what the empire could no longer hold. Their arrival was not a single event, but a slow tide of change. The Gutians did not build great cities, but they moved quickly, taking control of farmland and settlements that had once paid tribute to Akkad. In the cities, Akkadian officials found themselves without the soldiers or the stores of grain to push back. Over time, the empire's lines of command frayed. The Gutians did not erase all that had come before, but they shifted the balance. Where once there was order, there was now a patchwork of rival villages and half-forgotten roads. The Akkadian Age of Empire gave way to a new chapter, one written by those who had once been kept beyond the empire's gates. Even as the Akkadian Empire fell, its legacy did not vanish. The language of Akkad remained, etched in clay tablets that were copied long after its kings had passed. The empire's way of ordering lands and measuring trade became models for those who followed. Farmers still used the same tools, and scribes still shaped the same signs in soft clay. The Akkadian Empire had shown that distant lands could be brought together, not by chance, but by careful planning and the steady work of traders, officials, and craftsmen. In later ages, new empires would rise, borrowing from Akkad's ways of rule and its networks of trade. The Akkadian Age was brief, yet it planted seeds that would grow in the centuries to come. Stories told by Akkadian scribes were carried forward, whispered across generations, even as cities changed and rulers rose and fell. These stories spoke of legendary kings and the lessons of fate, of battles fought and lost. They were recorded on clay tablets, in the same script used to track taxes and trade. Myths and tales of distant heroes echoed with the fears and hopes of the people who told them. Though these stories mentioned forces beyond the world's borders, they were more than that. They were reflections of human longing for meaning. The Akkadians did not leave behind grand temples of stone alone. They left behind these tales, flickering like a lamp's flame in the darkness of the past. Life in the Akkadian world was built on rivers. Farmers watched the rise and fall of the Tigris and Euphrates, waiting for the moment to plant their seeds. The Akkadians, like those before them, dug canals and built levees, shaping the land so that water could feed their crops. These works were never easy. A collapsed bank could wash away fields in a single night. Yet, water was life, and careful hands found ways to tame the river's power, at least for a time. Harvests filled the storehouses when the floods were kind, and quiet prayers for rain were spoken when they were not. Though the empire's power was measured in armies and trade routes, its people knew that true strength was found in turning muddy water into rows of barley and wheat. In Akkadian workshops, skilled hands shaped the raw world into something more. Potters turned clay into vessels for oil and grain. Metalworkers coaxed copper and bronze into tools and blades. Builders stacked mud brick walls that kept out dust and heat, while weavers turned plant fibers into cloth for warmth and trade. Each of these skills was passed down from parent to child, a quiet line of knowledge that survived even the turmoil of empire. These crafts were not grand monuments, but they were the quiet heart of the Akkadian world. In every jar, every knife, every woven cloth, there was the patient work of hands and the quiet pride of those who shaped their world from earth and fire. The city of Akkad itself was a place of mystery. Ancient texts spoke of its walls and its markets, of palaces where scribes recorded the empire's pulse. Yet the city's exact location has never been found. Some believe it lies buried beneath the soil, hidden by centuries of silt and sand. Others think it may have been washed away by rivers that shifted their course over the ages. What remains are whispers in clay tablets, names of streets, of traders, of officials whose voices are long gone. The mystery of Akkad is a reminder that even the greatest cities can be lost to time, leaving behind only echoes for us to ponder. Long after the Akkadian Empire faded, its influence lingered in the words and works of those who came after. Later kingdoms borrowed the Akkadian ways of record-keeping and trade. Kings spoke of distant lands in the same measured words used by Sargon's scribes. In dusty markets, merchants still used scales and measures first set by Akkadian hands. Even as the world changed, these small details carried the memory of a time when one empire tried to bring order to a land of rivers and shifting sands. The Akkadian legacy was not a single statue or monument, but 1,000 small echoes woven into the empires that followed. The Akkadian Empire was a chapter in a story far older than any single city. It rose in the dust and heat of Mesopotamia and left behind a pattern of rule and trade that would echo through centuries. Its people shaped clay and bronze, told stories to explain the world, and found ways to share water and grain across wide valleys. Though the empire's palaces and walls have long since crumbled, the spirit of that age still lingers in the quiet flow of the rivers and the soft glow of the earth at dusk. It is a memory of how people, even in the harshest places, can build something lasting. A reminder that every empire begins with the simple acts of sowing and shaping, of listening to the land and to each other. Now moving on to lesser-known facts about this ancient empire. Fact 1. The Akkadian Empire is widely regarded as the first true empire in human history. Under Sargon of Akkad, it unified multiple city-states across Mesopotamia into a single political entity for the first time, setting a precedent for empires to come. Fact 2. Akkadian was the first Semitic language to be written using Cuneiform script. It eventually became the diplomatic and administrative language across the ancient Near East, influencing texts for more than 1,000 years, long after the empire itself was gone. Fact 3. Naram-Sin, Sargon's grandson, was one of the first rulers to depict himself with a horned helmet, a symbol usually used for figures of higher power. This was a bold move that blurred the lines between mortal leadership and something greater, a striking example of political ambition in ancient art. Fact 4. Despite being the heart of the empire, the location of Akkad's capital city remains a mystery to this day. Archaeologists have yet to find it, a puzzle that has lasted over 4,000 years, adding a layer of legend to its history. Fact 5. The Akkadian Empire built a vast network of trade routes that connected Asia, Africa, and Europe. Copper from Anatolia, timber from the Levant, and even rare stones from the Indus Valley found their way into Akkadian cities, making them some of the most interconnected places of the ancient world. Thank you for wandering with us through the rivers and dust of the Akkadian world, where every tablet held a whisper of ancient hands and every city hummed with quiet dreams. In our next chapter, we'll journey to the Babylonians, whose cities rose like poems etched in clay, and whose stories still echo in the hush of night. Until then, may your sleep be soft, and your dreams as boundless as the echoes that once shaped these lands.